Are you ready to be great? Stop letting self-doubt, insecurity, and fear prevent you from building your business. This morning, wake up to success. Here's John Preston.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Wake Up to Success. Today, we're going to talk about risk, not the kind that's the board game where you try to capture your opponent's soldiers on foreign lands. No, this type of risk is an essential part of growing your business. All of us are risk averse by nature. We're afraid to put ourselves out there for fear that we will suffer damage. In this case, sometimes that damage comes in the form of lost revenue. Sometimes it comes in the form of lost money. Sometimes it's embarrassment. But we're afraid of what will happen if we take chances. Now, that's a natural ability, but unfortunately, if you want to grow your business, it's one you have to overcome, because it is impossible to achieve the level of success that you want to achieve unless you're willing to assume a certain amount of risk. Now, I hear all the time from people who aren't entrepreneurs, who are scared to death of risk, and they're in their right place. Because if you're not willing to take chances, if you're not willing to risk failure, you're not going to grow a business, and you should have a job working for someone else, letting somebody else assume those risks. Now, how do you know when a risk is warranted or not? That's the million-dollar question. And in many cases, literally the million-dollar question. The first thing you have to do is determine if there is really a risk at all. Because a lot of fears that we create in our own mind are just that. They're in our own mind. They're not real. Often we will convince ourselves that what is at stake is much worse than it really is. For example, maybe you have a purchase you need to make, and it seems like a lot of money, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. And what happens is we convince ourselves that the entire future of our family's well-being depends on whether or not we make this purchase, when in fact it's simply not true. Our family is not going to be homeless on the streets if you buy this copy machine. But sometimes that's the way we feel. So to overcome that, you need to take a moment and think about the worst possible scenario. If you're about to take a risk, either an investment in a new project, investment in an ad campaign, or just whatever you're trying to do, think about what is the worst possible outcome. And what we will usually find out is that the worst possible outcome isn't nearly as bad as we have painted it in our mind. Now, you go through that exercise, you realize, okay, this is a significant risk. How do I know whether it's worth it? Well, the flip side comes into play. What is the best that can happen? If this investment or this risk works out exactly like I hope it will, or even better, what's the best that can happen? And then you simply have to weigh those against each other. Sounds simple, but most successful business owners will tell you when it comes to that point, you've weighed what the gains can be against what the actual worst case scenario risk can be. And it's even in question, take the risk. Because without risk, you can never have the reward of a truly successful business. If you were to go through the top million most successful people in the world and ask them how many risks they had to take to get to that point, the list would be long. Every single one of them has had multiple moments when they were left with that decision. Do I do this? Do I take this risk or not? And often the difference between getting to where you want to be and not getting there is simply saying, yes, I will take this risk. You know, I've mentioned several times in this podcast about a book that I'm very fond of, Homeless to Billionaire. It's the story of Andre Spira, who was homeless on the streets of Thailand and turned that into being one of the richest men in the country with real estate holdings all over the world. And basically, he is so convinced that being able to handle risk is such an essential part of business that when he brings people on board for many of his companies, the first thing he does after he hires them is take them skydiving. because he wants them to experience real danger, real risk. Because once you face that kind of fear and that kind of risk, it allows you to put the day-to-day risks that we all have to take to succeed in perspective. And that becomes a very, very powerful thing. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go skydive, but if you have trouble dealing with risk, if you have trouble taking chances, and every time you get to that point where you have to take a chance to move your business forward, if you shy away from it, then perhaps running your own business and growing your own business is not for you, because you have to be able to take those risks from time to time. Now, when we're talking financial risks, which can be really scary for somebody, especially starting their business, one of the things I encourage my clients to do is to, as soon as your business starts making a little bit extra money, to put a certain amount aside and create a fund that you are perfectly willing to lose. Because then you've got a risk fund. You can even call it a risk fund. That sole purpose is to take those chances, to take those extremely risky chances that could produce big results. Because it's only when you're willing to take those big chances that you can get the big results you crave. So when you're starting out, first of all, what's the worst that can happen? Second, what's the best that can happen? Compare those against each other. Make your decision based on that. Put yourself in a position to understand real risk and real danger, to put those small decisions in perspective. And finally, start setting aside some money that its sole purpose is to risk. And then you will find that you're able to really accelerate your business to that place you want to get to.